Hey Pauper fans, welcome back. Today we are talking about the new Japan-like set Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. We are only talking about the Pauper staple, the cards that eventually will be Pauper staple, and we are also talking about the cards that I like to play in Pauper, or at least to try to play it. Or eventually cards that I think are not enough powerful to see play in Pauper. In white color, I think, for example, that Spirited Companion, which is a card slightly hyped, is not really great. This little dog, basically an elvish visionary in white, doesn't really have anything relevant in the format. It's similar to Travel Inspector, because Travel Inspector is a little creature with a low converter mana cost that draw one extra card. But the good thing about Travel Inspector is its constitution. Spirited Companion is just 1/1, which is not really great. You can try to play it in a sort of token stack, something like Boros Bully, for example, or something similar, where you just need to draw your rally deficient effect, so you don't really care about the body of your creature, and having a little low-cost creature with that are able eventually to find a rally deficient effect may be actually good. I think that Travel Inspector is still better because it can block Egor of Bolas and survive, but eventually people will move to Spirited Companion, only because Spirited Companion costs 1 less mana, basically. Travel Inspector costs 1 mana, but you need to tap 2 mana to draw a card with Travel Inspector. That's kind of bad compared to Spirited Companion at least. Anyway, I think that the only kind of card in white in this expansion that can see some play, because there are some common Saga, because in this expansion one of the themes are the Sagas, which are kind of cool enchantment type, and for the first time we are also able to see common Sagas. But I think that those cards aren't enough good, at least the common ones, because in this expansion all the Sagas, as the last chapter, they transform into a creature, and the common Sagas doesn't really have a great effect in the first lore counter, and the last counter it transforms it in a weak creature. So for that reason I think they're truly bad in constructed formats, at least the common ones, obviously. I think we should go to the blue color and start talk about some interesting card. For example, Mirror Shell Crab. It adds one of the first way to interact with the Storm ability in Pauper, because it can counter an ability, and Storm on the Storm cards is an ability. It triggers when you cast the card with Storm, so you can counter with Mirror Shell Crab the Storm triggered ability. It's a kind of weak counterspell compared to counterspell or dispel, but it's kind of cool to be able to counter a Galvanic Release trigger or a Rip in the Graves trigger. Also, keep in mind that Channel isn't an alternative cost, is an ability, so you can't counter the Channel ability of Mirror Shell Crab with a Pyroblast or a counterspell or a dispel, because Mirror Shell Crab is a creature spell, of course, but you are not casting this spell. You are activating the Channel ability. Anyway, Mirror Shot Crab is a kind of cool to interact, to play around counter spells when you want to be sure to counter something important or relevant. If your opponent play a Pyroblast or this spell or anything similar. For example, it works in a similar way to Lose Focus, which is the Modern Horizon 2 counter with Replicate. Certain scenarios you can replicate Lose Focus to counter, for example, a Palace Sentinel against Burst Bully when they have 1 red mana open to cast Pyroblast. In this case, you don't need to replicate and you need only 1 blue mana, because Channel costs 2 generic mana and 1 blue mana. Obviously is weaker in that kind of scenarios, because it always work like a mana leak, but the upside of being able to counter, for example, a Blood Fountain ability, a Storm ability, a Relic of Progenitus ability, for example, maybe you are playing something like Cycle Storm and you want an answer to Relic of Progenitus or Nihil Spellbomb, and Mirror Shot Crab is that kind of card. It's versatile, can see a lot of play, because it's a good counter spell. The creature part is not very great, because it doesn't have hexproof. Ward is bad, it costs a lot of mana, but has a good body. 5-7 is a lot. You can block Gurmag Angler, Myron Forcer, Gearseeker Serpent. So maybe we will see it in some sort of control-ish or mid-range-ish kind of blue deck. And then we talk about the most powerful card in this set. Moonsecret Hacker is a better version of Ninja of the Deep Power. You may think that Ninja of the Power is better, because you always draw a card with Ninja of the Deep Power. Because with Moonsecret Hacker, you just draw a card when it deals damage, when it enters the battlefield. So the first time you ninjutsu it. After that, or if you played it by its mana cost, you just draw and discard a card. But the truly powerful part about Moonsecret Hacker is the cost of ninjutsu. Tapping only 1 blue mana to play a Ninja of the Deep Powers is broken. Ninja of the Deep Powers was already broken because it was the most similar thing to Monarch at only 2 mana, and this ninja, it costs only 1 mana to at least to ninjutsu. Obviously, you can play it by its converted mana cost on turn 2 if you need, but the broken part is that you are now able to land a ninja on turn 2, regardless of which version of ninja of fairies you are playing, because even if you have a tapped land or an Ash Barrens, you can attack with your Fairy Miscreant or Fairy Seer, and then you can already play Ninja of DT Power, in this case Moonsecret Hacker. Obviously, keep in mind that most times you play Ninja of DT Powers, it doesn't survive for a long time. Usually you are able to deal damage one time and then your opponent just kill it. So keeping in mind that this ninja will not survive the next turn, tapping 1 less mana is obviously better. Another cool part, obviously, is that having ninjutsu cost with only 1 blue mana means that you are now able to tap for ninjutsu more than 1 time per turn already in early game. So that means you can return more than 1 creature in your hand, which is a broken thing you can do with a ninja. For example, you are in middle or late game, you don't have a lot of cards in hand, you are attacking with a couple of Ogre of Bolas or Spellstutter Sprite. You can activate ninjutsu multiple times by keeping the priority, because ninjutsu, returning an unblocked creature, is part of its cost. So you attack with your sprite, you attack with your Ogre of Bolas, tap 2 blue mana, bring back 2 creatures. That's kind of broken. And you can also ninjutsu again if your opponent try to kill your ninja, if you have another ninja in hand, obviously. That was something kind of difficult with Ninja of Deity Powers, because Ninja cost 2 blue mana to ninjutsu. This one costs only 1 mana, so it's much easier. This card is broken. Fairies will get a great boost thanks to this new ninja, and I think we will see something like Fairies dropping a couple of Ninja of Deity Powers to play the full set of Moon Circuit Acker, or at least Fairies will play something like 3 copies of Acker, and only 1 or 2 copies of Ninja of Deity Powers. That's because this ninja is truly better compared to the Ninja of Deity Powers, at least in the early stages of the game. Another card that is obviously less powerful, but I truly like, is Snare Prototype. This card is really bad. It probably is not even playable in Constructed, but I like the idea of playing an aggressive Affinity or Cyborgs deck with 8 copies of Springleaf Drum, and Musnare Prototype is the most similar thing to Springleaf Drum. So maybe I will try something. Maybe Dimir or Izzet Cyborgs with Mirror Enforcer, Frogmate, and various cool little creatures. That would be cool. Maybe not playable, but cool. Then we pass to the black cards. Oh well, you can already talk about You Are Already Dead, which is kind of a reference to Kenshiro. And I think this card is bad. I saw a lot of people hyped about this card, but requiring another card in form of Kumbaji Switches, Pestilence, Creepart, or everything else makes this card kind of unplayable in constructed format, because you are not paying only 1 mana to destroy a creature. Okay, you are drawing a card. Do you really need to cycle your cast down while requiring a Kumbaji Switch on the battlefield? I mean, you can play Singing Blood, you can play Deadly Dispute, you can also play Thorn of the Black Rose. You don't really need a removal spell which is weaker compared to any other removal spell you can play in black. Oh, there's also Depth to the Kami, which is kind of cool because it's an upgraded version of Faircast Libation. Faircast Libation was not really played, but if you play a deck with, for example, Mystical Teachings, you can fetch it, and it's a cool toolbox. You can just sacrifice, you can Diabolic Edict a creature or an enchantment. And in this case, instead of forcing your opponent to sacrifice it, you exile it, which is cool, because Blood Fountain is one of the most played cards in the format, and you can exile a Mirror Enforcer for weakening their Blood Fountain or any kind of recursion. Oh, there's Mukotai Ambassador. I think that the black ninjas in this set are bad. I mean, they are not playable in constructed. but I'm a huge fan of Akiba Gang Shinobi, so it sad me a little that we are not able to see another playable Rat Ninja in this set. This is kind of cool in a black deck because it can be card advantage if you bounce any kind of ETB creature. It's a kind of good creature if you play it for its ninjutsu mana cost, because you are playing a 3/2 creature for only 2 mana, and it also has lifelink, which is not really it's not something we see every day in black creatures, at least at common rarity. Oh, nice. We have Ragnars Bargain here. Ragnars Bargain is another Village Rites effect for 2 mana. The good part about this card is that now you can play Rakdos Metalcraft or Rakdos Affinity Shell dropping Towcast because without any fear to face burn, because this card as a second part of its effect, it also gives you some life equal. You gain life equal to the sacrifice permanent mana value and a cost, whatever. And it's kind of good because affinity, the current affinity list are kind of weak against burn or those mid-range style decks that usually try to overrun affinity. For example, Bruce Bully and Gen Midrange, they usually doesn't really try to interact with the affinity card advantage. They just try to kill your creature and attack with their Seraph Packmate, Seeker of the Way, etc. So this card can be good because you can sacrifice your Wildspring or your creatures if they try to kill it. So you can both draw cards and also time work them to get more chances to not die too fast. So I think the card is good, and maybe it's time to play Rakdos Affinity instead of Grixis Affinity. Towcast is great, but if you want to play more untapped lands, Rakdos Affinity is probably better. You lose Towcast, so you probably need to play less draw spells, but thanks to Ragnars Bargain, probably is kind of better to play from 6 to 8 copies of 2 mana black draw divination spells. Maybe it would be great, maybe it would be bad, I'm not really sure about that, because Affinity is the kind of deck that you can play a lot of different cards, good cards, and also bad cards, and still win, because the deck is so much powerful that it's difficult to lose with Affinity, even if you play bad sometimes. Not real funny, actually. Oh, I really like Experimental Synthetizer, because it's something that it reminds me of Pauper, because usually you want to pair Mana Rock, a cycling Mana Rock with a Glowing Toke or a Kotsky Fisher, and when I started playing Pauper around 2014, no, 2015, Boros Monarch or maybe Palace Sentinel was already printed, so the deck was called Jeskai Kuldota, was playing Glowing Toke and Korsky Fisher alongside Kuldota Rebirth and Wildspring and Prophetic Prism. And Experimental Synthetizer seems to me a good card in those kind of Korsky Fisher deck. The good part about this card is that you exile or draw a card when it leaves the battlefield and not when it goes to the graveyard. It both exiles your top card when it enters the battlefield and leaves the battlefield, which is good because you can, for example, exile a Glinthawk, play the Glinthawk, bounce back experimental synthetizer, and exile another card. And that's a lot of card advantage. The sad part about this card is that you need to play the exiled card in the same turn you play the experimental synthetizer. So we'll probably not see a lot of copies of this card in a boss monarch style deck. Maybe it's better to play it in an aggressive affinity shell, maybe Rakdos Cyborgs, Boss Cyborgs, something similar. Anyway, this card just draw a lot of cards because you can also destroy it to generate a 2/2 token. So basically, the second part of this card is Free Action Rager. So obviously it doesn't draw a card, it still exile it, forcing you to immediately play it. But if your mana cure is really low, for example in an affinity aggressive shell, this card is just good. Probably will not see a lot of play actually, because I think that it's difficult to fit this card in a very specific deck. It's difficult to always get the card advantage from this card, but if you're able to find a powerful deck involving a lot of low converted mana cost cards, this card is just so great, in Pauper at least. In this set we also see a lot of enchantment auras that can enchant a land, which is kind of good because we already have the Zendikons from not Innistrad, from Zendikar. In this time we have the red one that transforms the land in a 3/3 with haste. I think that if we haven't seen a lot of play with the previous Zendikons, probably the new Zendikons aren't really great, and they will not see a lot any play or enough play to matter in the format. But keep in mind that you can do silly things with your indestructible lands, Darksteel Citadel, both Darksteel Citadel and Modern Horizon 2 dual lands. Oh, there's also Kami of Industry in red, which is good, I think. Not really powerful, probably, because it interacts with your graveyard, so you need a good artifact, a value artifact in your graveyard. But it's kind of cool, because you can reanimate an Ichor Wellspring and then sacrifice it in the end phase. So you can play a sort of Red Mold Drifter with extra steps, but in red it's not really troublesome because we already have a lot of Metalcraft shells with Cleansing Wildfire, and then you can play something like Giant Metalcraft or Rakdos Metalcraft with Deadly Dispute, Ichor Wellspring, and eventually Kami of Industry. I think that in a Rakdos Metalcraft deck where you don't want to cut the Black Oven Vampire to play Kami of Industry, because the good part about Black Oven Vampire is that Rakdos Metalcraft is a really aggressive deck. You can kill your opponent on turn 5 or turn 6 thanks to your reach in form of Black Oven Vampire and Galvanic Blast. And you also have a lot of recursion in form of Ardent Elementalist and Rippling Graves or Blood Fountain to bring back Bleak on the Vampire, and obviously Birding Party is a really aggressive card. So you can a good part of Rakdos is that you can raise decks that usually can have a good matchup against traditional mid-range style decks. Kami of Industry is more oriented towards card vintage, which is not really a problem in Ragnars Metalcraft, but there's a list of Ragnars Metalcraft that doesn't play Boarding Party, and is more focused on Culture Birth and artifacts that draw cards. So, for example, in that kind of list, you are willing to play Kami of Industry because you can bring back ATB artifacts or LTB artifacts similar to Equalizing in form of Chromatic Star, Golden Egg, also Blood Fountain. It's good. It's good, but in cascading Kami of Industry probably is not really great because maybe you don't have enough artifacts, especially in your graveyard. Maybe you can play it in 1 or 2 copies, but probably not the full set. Kami's Flare is a kind of cool card because it's similar to Serum Blades, but it deals damage to the player only if you control a modified creature. So basically is much weaker compared to Serum Blades. And I don't really think any Pauper decks is willing to play it because do you really want to play Serum Blades in Boggles? No, I think not. Probably Lightning Bolt is better in Boggles, but you don't want to play Lightning Bolt in Boggles, I think. The Washisong Shaper seems kind of good in an Affinity Shell, but I think that's not really powerful. It's similar to Glaze Fiend, which is a cool card, but Glaze Fiend bonus when you land an artifact is so much better, and this card is evasive because it has flying, so I think the Washisong Shaper can't be compared to Glaze Fiend. Maybe you want to play 4 copies of Glaze Fiend and some copies of the Washisong Shaper, because if you play a land plus a Blood Fountain, this creature already gets +3 +0, so it's attacking for 5 damages. But probably an Affinity deck with Marm Forcer, Frogmite, and eventually any other even Disciple of the Vault, because we are playing a lot of sacrifice effects in Affinity nowadays. Maybe even Disciple of the Vault is better compared to the Washisong Shaper. And I'm not at all a fan of Disciple of the Vault. In green, there aren't any good cards. I think these ninjas are truly bad. There are some enchantments which are bad. There's the other Zendikon. Sadly, the Ninja Turtle is uncommon, so we can't play Donatello in Pauper. But there are a couple of cards that I like, but they are probably not enough good to be played. The first one is Season of Renewal. Seems kind of good if you play a value deck with both creatures and enchantments, but I think that only Golgari Tortured Existence can play something like Season of Renewal. And Season of Renewal is probably not really good enough to be played in Tortured Existence. I think Tortured needs something probably different compared to Green Recursion for Tortured Existence. We have Tamiyo's Safekeeping, which is a kind of cool design for a common. I think this card will not see any play, at least now, because there's no deck that need a green counter spell for rammable spells or mass rammable spells. You can target any kind of permanent you control to give it X-proof and indestructible. You also gain 2 lives, but its lives part doesn't really matter. The cool part is that you can protect both your creatures, enchantments, artifacts, so it's cool. Maybe playable in Infect, but I also think that Infect needs Invigorate to return competitively in the format, so to me Safekeeping is just a cool card, you can keep it in mind, but this card will be probably not change anything in the current Pauper metagame. Then multicolored cards, there aren't any at common in the set. Land, we got only the game lands. We'll already see some sagas, but I think it's fine to give another E to the common sagas. As you can see, the first two lore counter doesn't really do anything relevant in most of these cards, at least at commons, right? Obviously. Putting counters doesn't really change anything. Okay, they're good in limited because a lot of cards interact with modified creatures, so it's fine. But all the sagas, as the last chapter, they transform into creatures, and basically all the creatures all the sagas creatures are kind of bad. We can take a look at Ukibar Honor Raid, which is probably the best creature saga for the common variety. Maybe can fit in Mono Black Sacrifice. I think that 2/2 creature with menace for only 1 mana is cool. And you also burn your opponent for 2 lives, which is kind of cool because you are tapping only 1 mana to play a creature and also deal 2 damage. It's a good rate for that deck, or Mono Black Rogue, because the creatures is also Rogue, and Mono Black Bar. Well, basically all the Mono Black aggressive decks are kind of similar, so Mono Black Mono Black Suicide and Mono Black Burn have a lot of cards in common. This card seems also good because it gives menace to the vehicles. Some years ago, Mono Black Suicide list was playing a couple of vehicles because you can play a lot of little creatures in early game, try to raise your opponent, and then in mid-late game you can play a train, or any other kind of vehicle, and try to raise your opponent with it because they're bigger compared to the early game creatures, and giving menace is not bad. The blue one seems kind of good compared to the black one because it draws you 2 cards. Okay, you are also discarding 2 cards, but you're getting a 2/3 flying creature for only 2 mana, similar to Kosuke Fisher. But playing a value creature in a blue deck usually means that you can also generate value from Ninja of the T power or Ephemerate, because the most powerful player deck in that kind of in Pauper usually plays Ninjas or Ephemerate, and this card doesn't really fit any of those 2 strategies. We have a couple of sagas at white, but the first one, which is a 4 mana cost 2 for flying creatures, is just bad. Giving counters doesn't really matter in constructed. And the second one is a 2 mana 2/2 creature with first strike that give you a scry 2 and 2 lives. Okay, that's kind of cool, but not enough, in my opinion, to be playable in Pauper. Finally, we can talk about the artifacts. We have a couple of vehicles, but I think they're not powerful enough to see play in Pauper. Then we have a cool card, Iron Apprentice, because it can be played in something like a modular deck. Obviously, modular is an earlier strategy in Pauper, but if you are more focused on for fun decks, then competitive decks, it's just another creature you can try. Network Terminal seems the most similar thing to Bonder's Ornament, so you may try it in Fogtron. It's obviously much worse compared to Bonder's Ornament because you draw and discard the card, and you also need to tap another untapped artifact, which is kind of truly bad because you need 2 specific cards to draw with Bonder's Ornament. So you need to resolve at least a couple of artifacts or to play artifact duels. So that first means if you are playing Tron, previously when Bonder's Ornament and Prism were legal, Artifact 8 wasn't really much of a deal because you usually already were able to draw at least 1 card with your mana Prisms. Now your opponent can dust to dust you and taking both 1 land and 1 mana rocks, which is truly bad. Probably in a Fogtron deck with Network Terminal, you need to play at least 12 artifacts, because if I had to play Network Terminal as both mana fixer and card advantage card, I want to play 4 copies of Network Terminal, because having 2 copies of Network Terminal seems kind of the best way to draw cards with Network Terminal, because you can tap your network, you can tap a land or a Sing It or a Network Terminal. Anyway, you need a lot of artifacts to be able to draw at least 1 card with Network Terminal with consistency. Maybe you don't want to play the artifact dual lands, maybe you want to play only Network Terminal and Sing It or whatever Sing It you want to play. Anyway, I think that you want to play at least something like 10 artifacts to be sure to draw at least 1 card with the Network Terminal. I think we have finished everything. Papercraft Decoy seems kind of it's a cute card. It's not great, but the card advantage card is cool because it when it leaves the battlefield, so you can bring back with the Glint Hook, but you need to pay 2 mana, so it's obviously bad. There's also Bazinga, the Understeel Colossus. Someone said that it can be cool in Cascade Tron or Fangin Tron, but I think in Fangin Tron you don't need more beatdown creatures. You want to have answers to the more aggressive deck like Stompy, Boggles, Burn, or also against the early game threats like Monarch or Ninja. So I think we were able to see everything else already as playable cards. So thanks you for watching this video. If you think I missed something from this new set, just tell me in the comments of this video. Hoping you enjoy it. See you later.